Welcome to On Strike, a production of Workers Strike Back. I'm Kshama Sawant. Unionizing Amazon is an absolutely vital task for rebuilding a fighting workers' movement in the United States. Amazon is the second biggest company in the world after Walmart. Amazon made an estimated $51 billion in profit last year and employs over 1.5 million workers. For comparison, the number of people working for Amazon is larger than the entire population of Hawaii, or about the same as the population of Philadelphia. This past Christmas, Amazon workers in North Carolina announced that well over 30% of workers at their warehouse had signed union cards and that they would be filing for a union election. The union they are organizing with is called CAUSE, which stands for Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment, and it has been organizing at the RDU1 warehouse in Garner, North Carolina for more than 2 years, fighting for demands including a $30 an hour starting wage, 180 hours of paid time off, and 1 hour paid lunches. In just 2 weeks, 4,000 workers at this warehouse will be voting to demand union recognition. If the workers win their election, RDU1 would become only the second Amazon warehouse in the United States to win a union election and the first in the South. This is, of course, going to be an uphill fight. Amazon workers in New York won a historic victory in 2022 at the JFK 8 warehouse on Staten Island, where a majority of workers voted to support the union and fight for $30 an hour. That victory inspired workers across the country to get organized, including workers at the KCVG Air Hub in Kentucky, whom Workers Strike Back has supported by raising more than $50,000 for their union effort through our weeks of action. But since the victory in New York, Amazon has fought back with vicious union busting, leading to defeats for workers at other warehouses, including Albany, New York, Bessemer, Alabama, and a second facility on Staten Island called LDJ5. At JFK 8, where Amazon workers won the union election in 2022, Amazon has refused to negotiate with the union. Instead, the company has sued the National Labor Relations Board to try and invalidate the election. Building a union at Amazon and forcing the company to negotiate will take a fighting strategy, including strikes and mass organizing involving tens of thousands of workers, and is very unlikely to be successful at one facility alone. We need fighting organizations that can bring together both union and non-union workers to build the kind of mass action and solidarity needed to fight back against Amazon's union busting and win bold demands like $30 an hour. And we need simultaneous strike actions at multiple facilities that really shut down production and heavily impact Amazon's profits. If you agree and you want to help rebuild a fighting workers movement, become a member of Workers Strike Back today. Sign up as a dues-paying member for $5 a month, $25 a month, or whatever you can afford. Every single dollar is crucial for building Workers Strike Back, including our upcoming week of action, February 8th to the 15th, to support Amazon workers in North Carolina, as well as our mass organizing conference in Seattle on February 22nd, where we'll be joined by Chris Hedges, Jill Stein, and working people from around the country to build our movement and to discuss how we can begin laying the foundation for a new major party for working people. The next day, on February 23rd, Workers Strike Back members will be voting at our first ever national convention in person in Seattle on our priorities for 2025. Workers Strike Back membership also funds our On Strike broadcast, which provides critical interviews, analysis, and a fighting strategy for the workers and the anti-war movement. Become a member now at workersstrikeback.org. I'm very glad to be joined by Italo Medelius and Reverend Ryan Brown, lead union organizers at RDU1 in North Carolina, and of course the CAUSE Union, which is carrying out the union effort in Garner. Italo and Reverend Ryan joined us at On Strike earlier last year to talk about their union effort, and we're happy to have them back again. Be sure to go back and watch that episode and also subscribe to our channel to help us reach more working people with interviews like this. Italo and Reverend Ryan, welcome back to On Strike.
Thank you for having us back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back. And before we get started, I want to say from the bottom of my heart to you personally, thank you. I remember 3 years ago when Ma Mary and I first started organizing workers. You invested in us, and your organization invested in us. And the funds that you invested, it has touched the lives of workers that you will never meet. And that gives me hope for a brighter tomorrow in a very dark time. So much obliged from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much, Reverend Ryan. That means a great deal to me personally and to everyone at Workers Strike Back and also our organization, Revolutionary Workers. And likewise, I think that kind of solidarity has to extend all over. Otherwise, working people are never going to win against the ruling class, right? So, first of all, can you tell us about what Amazon workers in North Carolina are demanding and what approach is Cause taking to win this union election and to win your demands?
Yeah, so thank you so much again for having us. So, similar to what we discussed last year around this time, last year, we were kind of getting our footing together for our big push in 2024, and it's kind of crazy to see where we are right now. We are finally at the vote, and that is a huge, huge accomplishment for a North Carolina union, especially in the South. Very few unions make it to actually have a vote before the NLRB. So some of the things that we're demanding are, your usual pay, ensuring that we have greater benefits, possibly a pension if we can, more PTO, peak bonuses because we're made to work mandatory extra time over peak season. So that is, your typical fall, seasons and right around Cyber Monday. So those are really your basics. But one of the things, Shama, that is a little bit intangible is dignity. As soon as you walk into an Amazon facility, the best way that you can describe it, I mean, it's like you're walking into a modern day plantation. There are incredible power imbalances, and dignity is something that we are demanding. Right, that's something that every Amazon worker, whether even some of the folks that might not yet support the union, feel that our managers talk down at us. That everything that we demand or ask for is just forgotten about. So all that we're asking for is to sit across a table like adults and negotiate, rather than just being told this is what you're gonna get. We just want to talk it out like adults and say, hey, this is what we need. What can you give us? And let's come to a solution that works for all of us.
Thank you. If I was to add to what Idolo said, organizing workers in Garner, North Carolina for the past 3 years in the Deep South, I've come to understand that workers join cause and become passionate about cause for various reasons. Several folks, they join cause because it's something that Idolo had just mentioned. It may be the pay, it may be the more time to spend with your family, making a living wage. But if I was to sum up all of our demands, if I was summing up all of our demands, I think that they equal out to just one basic thing, that workers want to be recognized, as Idolo said, for their dignity and their humanity. We're not robots. We hurt. We have every emotion that a human being has. And we want to be recognized for our humanity, because they don't view their workers as human beings that have children, that have family members, that have husbands, wives, partners. And I think that our demands can be summing up that, as Idolo said, dignity, respect, and to recognize our humanity.
I think you touched on a very important point, which is that in reality, and in my view, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that on the basis of capitalism, on the basis of the actual, as you were saying, Italo, the massive power differential between the bosses and the workers, such a thing as dignity and humanity, or the recognition of the dignity and humanity of workers under capitalism simply does not happen. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that on the basis of capitalism, it is simply not possible for workers to negotiate, quote unquote, negotiate with bosses sitting across the table, because they are never going to agree with that, because for them, what is of premium importance is their profits, and also what comes with that, the political power and the power in the workplace. So in reality, what we see is the exact opposite under capitalism, which is vicious union busting by Amazon, which we have seen, including against your specific union effort, including the unjust firing of you, Reverend Ryan, in December. Can you both tell us more about what kind of tactics Amazon has used to try and bust your union, and how have the workers responded? If we can start with you, Reverend Ryan, and if you can talk about also how you were fired.
Sure, I appreciate that question. My termination did not come to a surprise to anyone. It's actually something that I've been preparing for a while. I've been saving money, paying bills ahead of time, because I knew that it's in the DNA of this corrupt, evil, sinful corporation called Amazon to union bus. So that did not come to a surprise to myself. I knew that this day was coming. So for me, let's rewind and press play for a second. 2.5 years ago, when I first became an open and notorious union organizer, it was the very first time ever that I had been written up for anything at Amazon. And this write up was a final written that this white manager, who I've never met, I couldn't tell you who this manager was to this day, and another manager, a black woman, who said that I was making racist comments on the floor, which is incredibly insane. The board, I filed an NLRB charge. The board found merit in that charge. And just to be quite frank with you, I personally, and this is just me, going through that whole process, it took them 2 years later to even get to my hearing. I asked a simple question: what does justice look like? The response that I received is that justice would be that they would have to rescind a write-up that was already rescinded in the context that I had already passed the 90-day mark, or they would have to put up a notice up around Amazon, which they'll put behind machines and refrigerators, all that good stuff. And I said to myself, I had a conversation with myself, and I came to the conclusion that I just wasn't driving 2 hours in one direction for that type of justice and to play those type of games. And I left that saying to myself, like, for me personally, that the National Relations Labor Board is a joke. It is designed to protect workers. It doesn't protect us. Even during our election negotiations, it was almost like this region, this board, you're siding with the employer, and more so than with the workers who you are supposed to protect. And that moment, it made me realize that deep here in the South, a person who's experienced racism all my life, I've been called a lot of racial superlatives. I've been spit upon in elementary when I was the only black kid in my class, and I've had to, fight. I've even, on the list goes. And it made me realize that it's just a reminder that the systems that's supposed to protect us, they don't protect us. And in that moment, it occurred to me that I have to do a lot of educating. I have to train up a lot of militant people, because what have people that have been oppressed always done when systems fail them? What they do is they band together and they fight against those systems and of oppression. And so what we've seen, I think for me, I'm going to throw an alley-oop here to Idolo. The most concerning aspect of the union busting that I have been hearing and seeing is the identity politics. They terminated me. Literally, I dropped my own charge, and then about a month and a half later, you terminated me on the exact charge that the board found merit in that I had dropped. But what we're seeing is that they're playing identity politics. Now, the same company who said that I'm this racist bigot, they're telling Hispanic workers that you don't want to be with those black folk. They just a whole bunch of lazy people. And this is the same company that in the past, when they had rolled out various new policies, there was no language justice. And a lot of our Hispanic coworkers were getting written up or even being terminated because they didn't get the memo because Spanish is their only language. And the crazy thing about his union bus, and maybe one of the things he was going to share with you. So Idolo is a he just graduated from North Carolina Central University like a year or two ago. He passed the bar. He's a labor attorney, and he still works at Amazon. Like literally just today, Italo was challenging these highly paid union busters inside of a captive audience meeting. And the next thing you know, when he got back on the floor, he was called to HR for a random drug test.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of tactics they use, right? They try to find some sort of workplace violation to pin on anybody who's organizing for the union.
Yeah, and like even if you take for me, for example, I can't make this up. When we started collecting cards, there was an uptick in the Amazon union busting targeting me. Just about every week, I was under multiple investigations. And a lot of those investigations, I would tell the folks, I'm just not talking to you. I'm not wasting my time. And I had one lady, I think maybe back in October, she had threatened me that if I didn't talk to her, I would lose my job. And so I did have a conversation with her, and it was just crazy the stuff that they were throwing at the wall. It was like spaghetti that they was throwing on the wall to stick. And I can't even make this up. I was terminated on December the 3rd. And after my termination for about 2 weeks there, I still received emails from Amazon telling me that I was under an investigation. They wanted to talk to me, or either they had closed an investigation from all of these other investigations that they had been doing on me. So like the union busting is just in their DNA, and it's quite brutal. One of the union busting things that really that angered me, when we came on your show last year, Amazon obviously must have knew that Idolo and I was in Seattle. About a week or two later, they flew in like these union busters from all over the country. They even bombarded Idolo and had a conversation with him. And I never forget this. They were having the captive audience meetings, and this black guy, he threw me off for a second because he was different than what I had felt from their union busters. And I was busting up some union busting meetings, and he came and he whispered in my ear, and this is on my grandmother's grave that raised me, God bless her soul. He whispered in my ear. He said, "Nigger, you gonna sit your ass down in this meeting and you gonna behave." And everything in me wanted to swing on him. But I knew that you wanted an emotional reaction from me so you can get me out the door.
Right.
And true strength is when you can restrain and not say nothing. And that was so I can't explain that moment. Will be something that will go with me to my grave. Like this building is a building of majority 75% of black and Hispanic folk, and you in here telling me and calling me out of my name to get a reaction. And I looked at those union busters and their lawyers. I said, like, he's not trained for a Negro like me. I know you want an emotional reaction, but he's not going to get it out of me. And then when the cause folks start clowning him and telling him to go sit down, we never saw him back in that building again.
Right. And as you said, Reverend Ryan, union busting is in the DNA of these executives and billionaires. They are going to use whatever weapon they can against workers who have the courage to get organized. Like you were saying, they started attacking you, using identity politics against you and the other workers to try and divide the workers so that they don't get united to fight for this union. And as you know, I'm sure that Amazon and Jeff Bezos and the executives also went after me when I was in office on the Seattle City Council, because my office had the temerity to organize workers and union members to fight for and win the Amazon tax, which they repealed at first. Then they went after us in the 2019 election, and we still defeated them. But the point is, again, it's like they are not, the executives and the billionaires and the capitalists, they are not inclined to find any unity with workers because their interests are diametrically opposed to what workers need in terms of our own living standards, our dignity. And that's why Worker Strike Back has consistently been making the point that strike action, shutting down the profits of the bosses, that is the workers' most powerful weapon. That's what the history of the US labor movement shows, and also around the world. You said in our last interview that we need maximum pressure on Amazon to win demands like $30 an hour, which we completely agree with. We've already seen how Amazon has refused to even negotiate with the workers in New York, in JFK 8, nearly 3 years after they won their union election. And instead, Amazon is suing the National Labor Relations Board to try and invalidate their election. And that is on top of what you were saying, Reverend Ryan, which is that the NLRB itself is not really representing workers in the way that it's supposed to be doing. I mean, it's supposed to be there for workers, but really it's a very limited kind of tool. And that's why we think that strike action is so pivotal to not only winning the union election in Garner, but then on top of that, winning the first ever contract at Amazon. So my question to both of you is, have you been taking any steps in North Carolina to prepare for strike action to force Amazon to negotiate? And what do you think will be necessary to win a strike against Amazon?
So we have been having these conversations, Shama, specifically about, because we kind of are in a very lucky situation where we have already been able to witness what Amazon does, what they did in Bessemer, right, in Bessemer, Alabama, with Jennifer Bates, in which they essentially cheated, right? The NLRB held that it was an unfree and an unfair election, so they cheated in that election, and they were able to bust that union that way. Then, as you mentioned, with ALU, with Brother Chris and Derek Palmer, who they, just like us, were a worker-led independent union, in which that's how they won. They were able to win the election, but now they're being stalled in the courts. So now we have the sort of like the ability to see what should the day after the election look like. And it's not only going to be able to be taking this to the courts and hoping that the American legal system will help us. One of the things that we need to talk about very seriously is, how do we shift our focus after we win at RDU1 to Seattle? Because Seattle is the capital of Amazon. Seattle is the corporate seat of Amazon. That is where signature for any type of collective bargaining agreement comes from. It doesn't come from Jeff Bezos. It comes from our strategic target, David Zapolsky, who's sitting right there at top of Amazon skyscraper. And what we need is to get him down, right? So if we win this election, we're a bunch of Southern folk over here. We're a bunch of Southern church folk. So we have, if you come down here to the South, angels and spirits and divinities, we think they walk among us, right? So we're some crazy people over here. We are willing to take this to the next level. And we're not just willing, we're getting ready for it. A lot of people don't know that the Amazon labor movement is a continental movement at this point. It's not just these tiny little fulfillment centers and facilities that are, doing things in their own individual capacities. We're talking to one another. We got folks that we're talking to not just in Canada and the United States and Mexico. So this is a true continental movement. And if one of us wins, we all win. That's why they're freaking out right now. That's why they're sending managers from all over the nation to stop us. That's why they're holding these captive audience meetings, or these voluntary captive audience meetings, and lying to us because they're scared.
I think Italo brought up an important point about how Seattle is the corporate headquarters. And I wanted to ask you, Reverend Ryan, obviously Seattle is crucial, but I think what's more to the point is what Italo was saying towards the end, where this has to be a nationwide, and as Italo said, continent-wide fight back, which means that the strike itself, that is, in my view, needed in order to win a contract at Amazon, and before that, the union election, I think also needs strike preparation. I think that we need Amazon workers nationally to start getting prepared to go on strike. And so one of my questions to you was, what kind of conversations and preparation have Cause been doing by talking to worker organizers at the various facilities, including JFK8, including other ones, where we can start building for a coordinated strike action at Amazon facilities?
Okay, thank you for that question. So, let me say that from the very beginning, I have always approached organizing as I did as a pastor. I never knew anything about unions. Your world and the labor movement was a new world for me. It was almost like I was John Wick, and I came into a new reality. It was just a brand new world for me, and a lot of our success came from just having organic conversations and myself as a leader tapping into my skill set as a pastor. The church I used to pastor only had like 25 people. By the time that I had resigned, we had the largest African American church in our county, and we had quadruple in membership than the town itself had citizens. So organizing is in my blood, and I never realized that. A part of organizing the Black community um, was that everything that I did was intentional and strategic. And what's a part of the DNA of Cause is that everything that we do is intentional and it's strategic. We do have a strategic plan to get Amazon to the negotiating table. However, I'm not going to go into those details because one thing that Idolo and I agree upon is that Amazon is really good in union busting. They watch your show. You just had mentioned that they came after you. They read everything. They study us. And so I'm not going to tell the battle plan, but what I would like to suggest to you is that my spirit tells me that here in these divided states of America, that and living in a gilded age 2.0, that there is a desperation that's out there. It's something that's brewing in our country. And I fully anticipate that before the orange agent 4 years is up, that as the leader of this corrupt, evil empire called America, that we're going to witness in our lifetime a movement that's going to happen organically. People are tired. People are angry. They're frustrated. And what's sad is that a lot of folks voted Trump into office thinking that he can solve their problems. When the sad reality is that it did not matter what candidate you voted for. They both serve this evil Goliath called capitalism. But I genuinely feel like that we're living in a time where we're making our own history. History is going to tell this story, and the peasants are going to run on the council because everybody's tired. Poverty is the fourth leading cause of death in America. You have you have so many folks who are law-abiding citizens. They're hardworking people, and again, all of the systems are failing them. And so, when systems fail you, what happened? Organically and naturally, you're going to fight back, and I think that we're going to see that here in the next 4 years. But to answer your specific question, we do have a very specific game plan and battle plan, but that's something that we're not going to reveal.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Reverend Ryan, that it's necessary to have a high degree of security, often or especially around specific tactics, because, like you said, the bosses have hired a whole battery of people to monitor what the workers are doing, and I'm pretty sure they're monitoring this show as well. And as you said, that workers around the nation are exhausted from the inequality, the poverty, the fact that the rich are getting richer. And also, it is clear to more and more working people that neither the Republicans nor the Democrats represent us, that they both represent the capitalist class, and that workers do need to get independently organized. I will say, though, that in my experience, in my 15 years as an activist and organizer, I don't think that organically movements can succeed. Organically, people can start marching on the streets, yes, but at the end of the day, the leadership of social movements or inside the labor movement has to be very clear about what kind of strategy and tactics we need. And that's why I was asking you about the question of strike action, because ultimately, if we don't organize workers at Amazon on a mass scale and prepare for a strike action, it is going to be very difficult. So, I really extend to you my solidarity and from Workers Strike Back for a successful, beginning with maybe a one-day strike and then going forward beyond that to do wider organizing. And we hope to have you again to talk about that as the situation gets updated. And on that note, I also wanted to ask you about sort of the strategy moving forward for organizing. I mean, we know Amazon workers at Staten Island, at KCVG in Kentucky, and elsewhere have voted to join the Teamsters Union, and that has put them into a union with 1.3 million workers, and that gives Amazon workers an enormous amount of potential power, precisely because of all the union busting that you've been talking about. At the same time, we haven't seen the leader of the Teamster Union, Sean O'Brien, and the rest of the top leadership of the Teamsters taking a real fighting approach to fighting back at Amazon. And I wanted to use the example of the recent Amazon strike that happened. I mean, in New York, the Teamster leadership decided not to call for mass protests in response to the strike breaking by the NYPD and New York's Democratic Party Mayor Eric Adams. We also saw the Teamster leadership hold back a potential strike at UPS in 2023, which could absolutely have been explosive and would have been a major boost to building a union at Amazon. The Teamster leadership also hasn't come out forcefully in support of union efforts like yours in North Carolina, which are not currently part of the Teamsters plan, which I think they should be, even though, and as you yourselves have said, a victory for you would be hugely significant for the whole Amazon union movement. If we can win a union at the Garner facility, we know that will be hugely significant for the whole movement at Amazon. So, having said all that, what role do you see the Teamsters as playing in the fight to unionize Amazon? And what kind of strategy do you think the Teamsters need to employ?
Yeah, I can start with that, and I think Shama, that's such a good question that we've been grappling with for the last 3 years. What we pride ourselves in being is an independent worker-led union. We are our union, right? We, the workers, are decided to form our union, and we decided to say that we are the ones that decide how to strategize. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to work with, I guess, for lack of a better term, old labor or the more established larger unions, right? We have been begging to work with these folks for many years. We actually even started our whole process trying to, think about affiliating with a larger union that hails from New York. But we started realizing that the only way to defeat this behemoth, at least at this stage, is by workers on the inside. We are the ones that know our coworkers. We're the ones that are inside and know the union busting tactics. We're the ones that have to fight to make more money. We're the ones that have to feed our families, right? So that's where that hunger comes from. That's where that thirst comes from. That's where that need for victory against one of the largest corporate empires in the history of the world comes from. And you can't really get that hunger and that need to win if you're making a cushy salary, just to be honest with you. So we want to figure out a way to be able to, A, be recognized as part of the labor movement, because I think that's been, and I'm sure Rev would agree, that's been one of the biggest fights that we've had the last 3 years. It's just we as workers are not considered labor. It's the craziest thing to say. But we're discriminated against in the part of the labor movement simply because we decided to start our own union. But in order to be able to get to this larger continental movement that we need to all come together, not in a way in which larger unions come in and try to usurp us and try to, only help us out if we become a part of them. But how can we, as a united labor movement, pull our resources together, pull our knowledge together, pull the things that make us different from one another together, and take on Amazon as a united labor movement? I think that's the biggest step that we need to take right now. And we're willing to take it. Independent worker leaders are willing to take it. But we need old labor to come to the table and to say, we are a part of labor, let's work together.
I think you brought up an important point, Italo, about the salaries. It's not just unique to the Teamster Union. In general, unfortunately, we have a situation inside the labor movement where the lead staff get paid fabulous salaries, and they are completely out of proportion with the meager amounts that the members of the union make. And also, what about the wider working class? I mean, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25. We have, as Reverend Ryan, you were saying, so many workers languishing in poverty. So I personally do think it is completely objectionable that big sections of the labor leadership make $250,000, $300,000, and bigger salaries. And I, as a socialist, believe that the leadership of movements should make no more than the average worker's wage. As you know, the city council paid me over $140,000 a year, and I took home only the average worker's wage of $50,000, and the rest after taxes went to build solidarity movements, including strike funds. So I was wondering if you could, Reverend Ryan, if you could continue from what Italo was saying in terms of what kind of strategy we need. I mean, yes, we need something different, in order to put pressure on the labor leaders themselves to do the right thing. But I think the best way to do that would be to really help organize the rank and file in a militant strategy. And part of that, in my view, is the need to build a rank and file caucus that if we can start at RDU, and if we win the union election there, and if that becomes part of the Teamsters, then we will have a rank and file led caucus in the Teamster Union starting to develop. So what do you think about that?
So first and foremost, I agree 100% with everything that Idolo said. I also concur with what you said. Let me first talk about the Teamsters. I have respect for the Teamsters in the context that when you look at the larger traditional unions, in my humble opinion, they are the only ones that are on the block that have taken a real serious effort of organizing workers across the country and fighting Amazon. And I do thank them for that. And to our collective struggles as Amazon workers, they have brought a lot of attention to this fight. However, when I talk to a lot of traditional unions, it's almost it's insane. It's almost like it does not matter who I talk to. They always reaffirm to me why we're independent. We're independent because, again, there are systems that have failed us. One of my critiques and criticisms of larger unions is, how in the hell did you allow this Goliath to grow and to prey on poor people and grow with all of this muscle, and you sat back and you watched this empire grow and you did not take them on? I find that problematic. Then when I talk to a lot of those folks, a lot of them, they remind me of Amazon management. But then when I look at those of us that are in the warehouses that have successfully at least gotten to this point, JFK8, Bessemer, can't remember, across the street from JFK8, that's the sister up, Heather, up there in upstate New York. The majority of those buildings are buildings that are majority of workers of color, Black people and Hispanic people. And so when we talk to them, like, you sit behind the desk, you got this $500,000 salary that you're getting, and you know everything. And when I say you know everything, and can't nobody tell you nothing. That's problematic. When I first got into this movement, I was just as fresh as grass. But it all made sense when I took a crash course. Why the labor has been so stagnant in America. I've had various politicians on Capitol Hill to reach out to my phone personally. We're with you, Reb. On and on and on. Then I was like, okay, can we get an endorsement? Well, no, with these larger traditional unions, something like, it's all a part of this system. And so, again, it's a reason that we're independent. We're independent because those systems have failed us. But we do have enough sense to realize that we need a big brother, big sister that has a lot of muscle and deep pockets, that will be willing to listen to us. But there are very few of those unions that's in America that, at least the ones that we've came across, that actually listen to the workers and that are working. And so, like, I guess for us, at the end of the day, we are the leaders. You just said that you think that's not going to happen organically. And as you were saying that, I listened to that critique and that criticism, and I processed that through my mind real quickly. And I said, yes, that sister is absolutely right. So for us, the Idalos, the Chris Smalls, the Jennifer Bates, we are the leaders of this movement, and you need to listen to us, because not one of those larger unions have gotten to the point where we've gotten to. And even if you say RWDSU, it was still the workers who did the work.
Some of the things that you were pointing out about the serious deficiencies that we've had now, I think almost for 50 years in the union movement, that where the labor leaders almost appear like management, I would call that business unionism. That's the problem. That's the ideas of business unionism have been the ideas that have dominated the labor movement for so long. And that's why we need a revival of what I would call class struggle unionism. And that's why I was saying that I think forming a rank and file caucus at RDU1 and at Garner would be a really important step that we should be taking together, as a workers' movement, so that we start instilling those ideas among the rank and file of the union movement. Because like you said, we can't hold our breath that the current labor leadership is going to accomplish those things, because you're right, they failed. And so that actually brings me to another question that I wanted to ask you your opinion about, which is the strikes that supposedly happened at 10 Amazon locations during Christmas. Amazon has 110 centers across the country. The union actions were happening at less than 10% of the Amazon facilities. And it gives me no pleasure to be critical of the action, but I think we inside the labor movement, inside the movement of workers, we do need honest assessments of what succeeded and what didn't and what needs to change. And so about those strikes at Christmas time that the Teamsters organized, Joe Burns, the author of several books on strike strategy, said this. So what I'm about to say is a quote from him. He said These strikes seem very similar to the approaches in fast food, rideshare, and at Walmart over the last decade or so, where the union would put out press releases claiming a giant corporation had been struck. This would gather publicity and generate some excitement on the left, but it did not impact production or even draw out more than a tiny fraction of the workplace. The actions are really more informational picketing with a media spin of a strike tacked onto it. The problem is we have over a decade of experience showing such efforts don't really work. They gather press and at times can help liberal groups or unions pass labor legislation, but have shown little in the way of furthering permanent union organizing. Can you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. And we know some of the folks that were involved in some of those strikes, and we have very open conversations with them, and we have voiced our our thoughts with them as well. But one little anecdote about them, and any type of action in front of an Amazon to me is better than nothing. But I do remember I was scrolling through TikTok one night, and the strikes were happening. And there was this girl that was live streaming from inside of an Amazon facility that was being struck. She didn't even know that the strike was happening. Outside of her workplace. Similarly here, I don't remember, Rev. I think we might have had one day where we might have tried it here, and there was very little coordination with the workers inside of RDU1. A lot of us didn't even know that it was happening, so it did seem to be a little bit more of a about a thing that is more of like a protest type of thing rather than a strike, to maybe garner some attention to the Amazon struggle. But I do agree with you, Shama, that I think it fell a little bit flat. And inside of the warehouse, it didn't really change anything for our organizing, at least here at RDU1.
And so for me, I kind of have mixed emotions about that whole strike. When I was inside the warehouse at the time, and I do remember a lot of the ways that I was able to have conversations and connect with workers was that those who were actively involved in social media that they did see they had been watching various videos and information about the Teamsters, and so that created a conversation, and it also brought awareness to them that this is a larger movement and that workers all around the country, and then when Uni Global, I know they're not mentioned with your question, but when they did the strikes in Europe and around the world, they created a lot of conversations like, hey, this exploitation and these poor working conditions are taking place around our country and all around the world. What I struggled with was, and I've shared this with the Teamsters, so if I had not shared this with them, I wouldn't repeat this in this platform. But what I struggled with was, why did you wait 2 weeks before the strike to let us know? I appreciate that their local had came to calls and asked could they strike outside the facility, and we gave them the green light. But if you had told us 2 week before 2 weeks, gave us a month in advance, we could because we could have mobilized and organized a lot of workers to make that mean something. And that is, I guess, the problems that I see in the labor movement. We're not working together, and it's so territorial. I'm gonna get credit for this. This is, on. Like, if we're really about um, fighting for workers and making our um, our reality a more democratic process, why wouldn't you talk to the folks that have an inside? They know what's going on the inside and can connect with workers. And I think that my criticism would be, I can't say for all of those places, but at RDU1 and Garner, that's where they failed.
Yes, and like you both said, I think mobilizing Amazon workers themselves into these actions is going to be part of the backbone of creating successful actions. And so when you don't have the word spread to the workers themselves, that does limit the power of these actions. I mean, I totally agree with Italo that some action is better than nothing, and we always support any kind of union action where we can get some momentum, even if it's limited. However, as you both have also sort of indicated, when we organize against a behemoth like Amazon, we have no choice but to set our sights much higher. And actually, there is so much support among the workers. Not only would Amazon workers have been mobilized, I think other workers would have been mobilized in solidarity, because there is so much support for unionizing at Amazon, because workers instinctively understand that if we can win a contract at any facility at Amazon, if we can win union elections at Amazon, it is going to propel the union movement overall forward. So all workers gain if there are victories at Amazon. And I think another thing that is sort of a universal question for workers as a whole, not just for Amazon workers, are the obstacles that exist in our path in the union movement because of the attachment of most of the union leaders to the Democratic Party. Reverend Ryan, you were saying correctly earlier about how neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are on the side of the workers. And we've seen the labor leadership pouring hundreds of millions of dollars every election year into electing Democrats, who then, unsurprisingly to us, end up betraying workers, just like when the Biden-Harris administration broke the railroad workers' strike. And now you have some union leaders like Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters cozying up to Trump and the Republican Party, but we know they don't represent working people either. We saw the leader of the UAW, the auto worker, Sean Fain, actually just published an op-ed, I believe, in the Washington Post, where he said, we're ready to work with President Trump. I mean, I think all of this is just a mistaken approach on the part of the labor leadership, where we need independence from these parties to win for workers. That's why, as I said, Workers Strike Back is calling for a new working class party, which not only will run independent labor candidates, but also fight effectively to build a union movement and organize campaigns like yours. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were about all of this. Do you think that the labor movement needs its own party? And what role do you see unions like yours, organizations like Cause, playing in building that kind of party?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shama, and we've also been discussing this from day one. What is going to be our relationship with the political system? And right now, the way that we have it is we don't endorse at all. It's part of our rules that we don't endorse political candidates, because our job as a union is not to make somebody feel good or to help somebody win a popularity contest. Our job as a union is to pressure. Our job as a union is to build enough power to be able to get to these power brokers and tell them, you have to do this or it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for your base. It's going to be a problem for whatever, kind of like the same things that we're talking about, the necessity for striking. Striking is, going after the economic prosperity of a corporation to make them come to their knees. It's kind of a similar thing in the political system. We need to pressure these folks. We don't need to get in bed with them. We need to make them known what we need and that there will be consequences if they don't respond. And I think that that is another part of being an independent union, right? That we're not in bed with the Democrats. We're not in bed with the Republicans. We're not in bed with any politicians. Right now, we are drafting a constitution, right? Which, we can't talk too much about. But these are the conversations that are being had. Are we going to have some sort of thing in our constitution that says that we don't endorse at all? Or if we do, what is that going to look like? So these are very active conversations that are being had right now. That for us, the way that we've been historically doing this has been we're independent through and through. And that means that we're not in bed with Amazon, we're not in bed with the larger union, and we're not in bed with politicians either.
I fully agree about the idea of not endorsing the candidates from either the Republican or the Democratic Party. I mean, that much is clear. And in fact, that is part of the problem, that the labor leadership, or a big section of it, is so cozy, actively cozy with the Democratic Party, and then some others are making overtures towards Donald Trump and the Republicans, and both are dead end for working people. But what do you think, Reverend Ryan, about the need for the working class as a whole, and then specifically the union movement, to have its own independent political organizations? Because unless we make it very clear that we are going to be independent of the Democrats and Republicans and that we are going to build our own political organizations, unless we provide that kind of very specific alternative, then the field is still remains clear for the labor leadership to continue putting the Democrats forward. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless we show workers that instead we should have our own independent political organization, our silence is not going to stop the labor leadership from continuing to promote the Democrats. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that?
So, the church I pastor, Macedonian Missionary Baptist Church in Waco, North Carolina. It is in Western North Carolina by way of Cleveland County. A lot of politicians sat in my pulpit. As a matter of fact, our former Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, used to sit in my pulpit quite often. When I think about this whole process of organizing, and it showed me how the world really is. I remember maybe last year I read across an article about North Carolina politics. And here in North Carolina, the only reason that you have a majority in the House of Representatives now is because the GOP here, they gerrymandered and they changed the lines in favor for them. And I remember that as crazy as the politics are here in North Carolina, I remember reading an article that left an indelible impression on me. Our lame duck governor, who was lame duck from the very beginning, Roy Cooper, and the Democrats on his Democratic Party and the Republicans, there was an article that came out, and it said that North Carolina is number one for business in the entire nation. And both sides of the aisle, they were clapping, they were happy, and they said all of these positive comments collectively. So I said to myself, it's number one for business, but it's terrible for workers. And this whole process has allowed me to go into rooms I never thought I would be able to go into, and spaces and meet people I never thought that I would be able to meet, and to see how politics and power actually operates. In every room, every space, every politician that I've met, I come and I leave that space in that room with the same conclusion. You don't serve the American people. You serve capitalism. You serve our masters, the ruling class. You serve the 1%. And I don't know how we will create a workers' party, but I do know that a lot of the conversations that I had trying to get people to vote, they were just totally disengaged from the whole political engagement, because they felt that it did not matter who they voted for. And so I think that a win here in North Carolina will give us opportunity to not only become leaders here in the South, but it also gives us an opportunity, because a lot of things that we're doing, we're educating our co-workers, we're educating people that we come across, we're waking up their consciousness. And it also gives us the opportunity, like, yes, politicians and the two-party system is breaking. It's falling apart. Yes, it has failed us. But power has always been within the people. And we can create our own power structure that get these clowns, regardless of what their political affiliation is, out of DC and genuinely reclaim power back to the very people that built this vast empire called America.
I think that it's absolutely true that there is no substitute for organizing in the workplace. I think that is, the organizing in the workplace, the union movement and militant strike actions, shutting down the capitalist profit machine, all of that is absolutely the backbone of changing society. There's no question about that. I'm just saying that I think in addition to that, the working class also needs to run our own candidates, and I think we need our own independent working class candidates as a step towards a new party. I mean, just to give a very concrete example, I was on the city council for a decade as an independent, as a socialist. I won 4 elections, and we fought for working people in office. We were not your average politician. And as you all know, we won the first major city $15 an hour minimum wage. And I'm not sure if you know, but alongside that, we also won inflation increases in that wage, which itself was a big fight within the larger battle for 15. And so that's why starting January 1st this year, the minimum wage in Seattle is $20.76, which is by far the highest minimum wage. And also we won the Amazon tax, we won a whole host of renters' rights. So I just think that we can't, as workers, we can't afford to ignore elections. What we need to do is to fight for independent labor candidates who then we fight to hold accountable to our movements. I don't think that it's an automatic by any means. I think you both have touched on very important aspects of how there are so many corrupting influences within the political realm. Like once you get some kind of position, then you get wooed by the powerful interests and so on.
I was telling Idolo this, I think we had this conversation last night. I'm from Western North Carolina. I'm from the mountains. And the one thing that Cause has been able to do is we've been able to get above the snake line. If anyone lives in the mountains or knows anything about the mountains, the higher and higher you hike a mountain, you get to a point where a snake cannot cross that line, and there are no snakes the higher you go. Proverbially speaking, who are the snakes? The snakes are people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all of these other very wealthy CEOs that use the same playbook to divide people and play these identity politics. One of my criticisms with the left is that a lot of the folks that have been a part of Cause on the outside, and I've had to try to explain it to them because I've had my own cultural shocks. I'm a Black Baptist minister, kind of came from like a conservative community. And all my life, I've been taught that communism is evil, socialism is evil. And hear me well, and hear me in my very best voice. I remember that we were in Durham, North Carolina at a Southern Workers Assembly gathering for a weekend. I met a young lady, and she had a Russian flag. And I said, oh, something. I was just asking a basic question. She said, I'm a communist. It threw me back for a second. Didn't know what a communist was, didn't know what a socialist was, and the going into, the greater details. And so I guess the point that I'm getting at, that like, yes, you, Italo, myself, and several other people that are a part of labor and understand what's actually going on. My criticism is that, and my critique is that we have to be careful with when we're talking to workers. We got to get them above that snake line. That if we throw certain words out, that automatically scares them away, and they don't hear nothing else that we have to say. A part of the folks that belong to Cause is very diverse. We have folks that go by all pronouns. I've been able to connect with the most conservative rednecks that you would ever meet in your life. And that's just by having built a relationship and having conversation. And what's insane is that once you start talking to them about how this system is corrupt, you may throw in points about socialism, communism. They agree with you and don't even realize that they're agreeing with some of the very points that they've been taught all their lives is evil, sinful, and wrong. And so I think if we're truly, genuinely going to build worker power and build a true, genuine workers' party here in these United States of America, we have to cross that snake line. But at the same time, we have to be strategic and intentional with how we talk to people, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely it makes sense. And I would say, though, that the problem, in my view, has not been that we've had a bunch of people like me wanting to fight and workers have not responded because somehow there was a communication gap. I would say the problem has been the opposite, which is that there hasn't been the kind of example that we have set in Seattle, and there's a huge openness for that kind of fight back. And it doesn't matter whether you call yourself socialist or not. If you want to fight against the bosses, if you want to fight for workers like yourself, for working families like your own, then there is a huge opening. I mean, we saw how much support Bernie Sanders got. Now it's a long time ago in 2016, but how much support his campaign program of $15 an hour, Medicare for all, union rights, taxing Wall Street, there was so much support for that throughout the nation. Millions of workers in the South were supporting it. Didn't matter that he called himself socialist. People were so excited about his program. And what really went wrong was not that Bernie Sanders was calling himself a socialist. What went wrong is that Bernie Sanders himself sold out to the Democratic Party, right? I think that's the problem we have to overcome. In fact, throughout history, there has been a lot, as the examples you were giving are so true, which is the demonizing of socialist ideas has gone on for over 100 years, well over 120 years. And we know, as you know, as Italo knows, genuine socialism is essential to the labor movement because what it provides is an understanding of how to fight effectively for the interests of working people. I mean, we know the major strike actions that happened in the 1930s, which led to the New Deal. They were led by socialist workers. Socialists are not separate from workers. Some of the workers are socialists, but it's not so much about labels. It's about the ideas and the strategy, right? The understanding that capitalism is hostile to workers' needs, and those who benefit from capitalism are never going to be on your side. That's all I mean by what I'm talking about.
No, amen. And the church said amen. And the reason I'm saying that is because this whole process has even challenged me. I know that I'm a registered independent voter. I know I'm not a Democrat, nor am I a Republican, and I have tried to figure out what I am. And I've only came to the conclusion that I'm just anti-capitalist. And as a person of faith and as a Black Baptist minister, when I read Genesis to Revelation, I see that as a book of liberation. When I pick up Hindu texts, Buddhist texts, Islam, the Quran, it doesn't matter. They're all liberating texts. And so for me, I just know that I'm anti-capitalist and I don't get into labels. And as a Christian, I've come to the conclusion that a lot that we've been taught by Christianity has came from a white supremacist perspective and like a misogynist perspective, and that true genuine Christianity, and to me it's not just true genuine Christianity, it does not matter what that religious conviction is. True religious convictions, they're all about liberation. That's why Thomas Jefferson said that we hold these truths. What was those truths? He examined all the religions and philosophies of the world, that all men are created equal. And with that being said, that I just don't think that as a spiritual person, a Christian person, that true Christianity, true Buddhism, Hinduism, other forms of whatever gods you talk to, that it can't coexist with capitalism.
The ideas of social justice cannot coexist with capitalism, and that's why I really appreciate you saying that you're anti-capitalist, because that's the kind of understanding we need in the union movement. That's super crucial. And on that note, as you know, Reverend Ryan, Workers Strike Back is holding an organizing conference in Seattle on February 22nd, along with Chris Hedges, Jill Stein, a lot of working people and union members across the country. Some of them will say they're anti-capitalist, some of them may not, but they all want to fight back against the bosses, and we want to unite on that basis. And that will be about a week after your union election. Will you, Italo, and other workers from Cause be able to join us in Seattle for that conference?
It is our prayer that we will be able to make it to Seattle, and so we're having discussions now to figure out how that's going to look and how we're going to be able to finance that for low-wage workers. But a lot of the folks and workers that we have shared that with, they want to go to Seattle. But more importantly, even after our campaign is over with, as Idolo was alluding to in the interview, Seattle is where the beast lies. And so we definitely want to be there a week after our election.
I'll just say that we in Workers Strike Back and in Revolutionary Workers, we're really hoping that workers organizing with Cause at RDU1 in Garner, North Carolina can join us in large numbers at the February 22nd organizing conference in Seattle. And I wanted to urge whoever's watching this, if you support the workers at Garner, then please donate to Workers Strike Back to help bring the workers to Seattle, because as Reverend Ryan said, they're low-wage workers. We need financial support for their flight and accommodation. So I'm really appealing to those who are watching this, if you can afford to spare some dollars, please donate to Workers Strike Back so that we can help, we as Workers Strike Back as an organization can help bring the North Carolina Amazon workers to Seattle for the organizing conference. And on that note, I wanted to thank Reverend Ryan and Italo Medelios for joining us for this interview. I know you guys have a lot going on, fighting Amazon's vicious union busting, and we appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us, sharing how you are organizing the workers there. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in Seattle in February.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you on the weekend of February 21st. So we're looking forward to it.
Yes, absolutely. And Reverend Ryan, let me know if you're doing any kind of rally in early February, and if you'd like me to come and join you, I would be happy to come.
I can already tell you, February the 8th, I don't know the time, we will have a rally. And we would love to have all of that good militant energy that you bring. So please fly to town. Thank you, and we'll see you on February the 8th.
Thank you so much. Take care. Solidarity.
Same to you.
This was such an important discussion about what's needed to organize the behemoth that is Amazon. In this fight, it's crucial that we base ourselves on the best strategies and tactics. As we were talking about earlier, socialist ideas are critical to the labor movement and its success. It's no accident that the major breakthroughs in the history of the American labor movement were led by socialists, including, as I mentioned, the 1934 general strike in Minneapolis. We talked about that general strike in a recent episode, which I hope you'll watch if you haven't already. Socialist ideas combine a scientific understanding of how capitalism functions and what class struggle means with an understanding of the past struggles, drawing on the lessons of both past victories and past defeats. As working people, we can't afford to not learn those lessons. The bosses certainly know them. The bosses will always vilify socialism, and that should be no surprise to us. They vilify it because it's the only thing that is a real threat to them and their system. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you've been watching On Strike, you know that we bring coverage, political analysis, and strategy for the working class of the kind you simply won't find in the mainstream media. Become a member of Workers Strike Back so that On Strike can continue to bring the kind of discussions about strategy needed to fight back and win. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on donations from working people. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. And please also register on our website for our organizing conference on February 22nd and our first National Convention of Workers Strike Back on February 23rd, both in Seattle. Both of these events will be crucial to building the workers' movement in the era of Trump. We need to not just be on the defensive against Trump and the billionaires, we need to go on the offensive. Solidarity.